What if I told you that right now, somewhere in Australia, there's a wooden doll that has been walking around at night for over 50 years? What if I told you that this same doll has sent grown adults to the hospital, caused electronics to malfunction, just by being near them, and has been caught on camera moving by itself? And what if I told you that everyone who has tried to destroy this doll has failed because it somehow always finds its way back home? You'd probably think I was telling you a horror movie plot. But this isn't fiction. This is the terrifying reality of Kerry Walton's life. And tonight, you're going to hear the full, documented story of what might be the most haunted object on Earth. I'm talking about Letta the doll. And by the end of this video, you're going to question everything you thought you knew about what's possible in our world. Fair warning though, some of you might want to watch this with the lights on, because what you're about to hear has kept people awake at night for decades. Before we dive into this nightmare, smash that subscribe button, because after tonight's story, you're going to want to stick around for more investigations into the impossible. Trust me, Letta is just the beginning. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt like you were being watched? That uncomfortable sensation that makes your skin crawl and the hair on your arms stand up? Well, imagine feeling that every single day, knowing that a small wooden doll with human hair and glass eyes is the source of that overwhelming dread. This is the reality that Kerry Walton has lived with for over 4 decades. Our story begins in 1972, in the remote countryside of Wagga Wagga, Australia. Kerry Walton, then just 20 years old, was visiting his family's property when he decided to explore an old abandoned house that had been sitting empty for years. The house belonged to his grandmother's family and had a reputation among locals for being somewhat unsettling. People avoided it, claiming they heard strange sounds coming from inside, especially at night. Kerry, being young and skeptical, decided to investigate for himself. As he explored the dusty, cobweb-filled rooms, he stumbled upon what appeared to be a root cellar or basement area beneath the house. It was here, in this dark, musty, underground space, that he made a discovery that would change his life forever. Tucked away in a corner, covered in decades of dust and debris, was a wooden doll unlike anything he had ever seen. The doll stood approximately 20 inches tall and was carved from what appeared to be a single piece of wood. But what made this doll truly extraordinary and deeply unsettling were its incredibly lifelike features. The face was carved with remarkable detail, displaying an expression that seemed to shift between innocence and something far more sinister depending on how you looked at it. The doll's most striking feature was its hair, its real human hair that had somehow remained intact despite the passage of time. The hair was brown and appeared to have been carefully styled and maintained, which was impossible given the doll's location and abandonment. Even stranger, the doll was dressed in what looked like period clothing from the late 1800s, complete, with small leather shoes that showed signs of wear, as if the doll had actually walked in them. Kerry later learned from elderly family members that the doll had been in the house for as long as anyone could remember. Some claimed it had been there since the house was built in the 1890s, while others suggested it might be even older. The most disturbing revelation came from his great-aunt, who told him that the previous occupants of the house, a family with several children, had abandoned the property suddenly in the 1920s. After claiming the doll was possessed by an evil spirit, despite these warnings, Kerry decided to take the doll home. He named it Letta, a combination of letter after something his brother said. When Kerry asked if he should keep it, this seemingly innocent decision would mark the beginning of decades of unexplained phenomena, terror, and experiences that would challenge everything Kerry thought he knew about the natural world. The strange occurrences began almost immediately after Kerry brought Letta into his home. Within the first week, Kerry noticed that objects in his house would move on their own. Small items like keys, coins, and personal belongings would disappear from where he had left them, only to reappear in completely different locations days later. At first, he attributed this to his own forgetfulness, but the pattern became too consistent and bizarre to ignore. The most unsettling incidents occurred. At night, Kerry would wake up to the sound of what seemed like small footsteps walking through his house. When he would get up to investigate, he would find Letta in a different position or location than where he had left it. Sometimes the doll would be found standing upright in rooms where Kerry was certain he had left it sitting down. Other times it would be discovered in completely different rooms altogether, but the physical movements were just the beginning. He described as an overwhelming sense of dread whenever he was alone with the doll. He would feel as though invisible eyes were watching his every move, and the temperature in rooms where Letta was present would drop noticeably. Friends and family members who visited Kerry's home immediately noticed something was wrong. Many refused to enter rooms where the doll was present, claiming they felt nauseated or inexplicably frightened. The most disturbing incident occurred about 6 months after. Kerry brought Letta home. He woke up one night to find the doll sitting on his bedside table, staring directly at him. Kerry was absolutely certain he had left the doll in his living room before going to bed. What made this experience truly terrifying was that Kerry felt completely paralyzed, unable to move or speak while the doll seemed to be studying him. He described feeling as though something was trying to enter his mind, probing his thoughts and memories. This experience was so traumatic that Kerry seriously considered destroying the doll. However, every time he attempted to get rid of Letta, either by throwing it away or trying to burn it, the doll would somehow find its way back to his home. Neighbors reported seeing a small figure walking through the streets at night, always heading in the direction of Kerry's house. These sightings became so common that local police received multiple reports of a child wandering alone at night. But when they investigated, they found nothing. As word of Letta's strange behavior spread throughout the community, Kerry found himself at the center of a phenomenon that attracted attention from paranormal investigators, researchers, and curiosity seekers from around the world. The first official investigation was conducted by the Australian Society for Psychical Research in 1975. Just 3 years after Kerry discovered the doll, the team of investigators spent several days in Kerry's home, using various equipment to monitor electromagnetic fields, temperature changes, and other environmental factors that might indicate paranormal activity. What they documented was unprecedented in the field of paranormal research. Their instruments recorded significant electromagnetic disturbances whenever the doll was present, the readings that fluctuated in patterns that seemed almost intelligent. Temperature. Drops of up to 15 degrees Celsius were recorded in the immediate vicinity of the doll, with no identifiable source for this dramatic change. Even more remarkable, several investigators reported feeling physical sensations when near Letta, including sudden headaches, nausea, and what they described as an overwhelming sense of malevolence. One of the most significant pieces of evidence collected during this investigation was a series of photographs that appeared to show the doll in different positions over the course of a single night. Despite being placed in a sealed room with no human access, the photographs taken at regular intervals using time-lapse photography clearly showed Letta moving from a seated position to standing, and then to what appeared to be a walking pose. Dr. Margaret Chen, a psychologist who participated in the investigation, noted that the doll seemed to have a particularly strong effect on children and animals. During her observations, she witnessed several instances where children visiting Kerry's home would refuse to enter rooms where Letta was present, often breaking down in tears and claiming the doll was angry or scary. Dogs and cats showed even more extreme reactions, often fleeing the house entirely or becoming aggressive when forced to remain in the doll's presence. The investigation concluded with a report that stated, while they could not definitively prove the doll was haunted, the evidence suggested phenomena that could not be explained by conventional science. This report brought international attention to Letta and established it as one of the most well-documented cases of a potentially haunted object in modern paranormal research. Following the initial investigation, Kerry received requests from researchers, television producers, and paranormal enthusiasts from around the world who wanted to study or film Letta. However, Kerry quickly learned that allowing others to interact with the doll often led to disturbing consequences for the visitors. In 1978, a British television crew arrived to film a documentary about Letta. During the filming process, 3 separate crew members reported feeling violently ill when handling the doll. One cameraman claimed that while filming close-ups of Letta's face, he saw the doll's eyes move and track his movements. When the footage was later reviewed, there did appear to be subtle changes in the doll's facial expression between shots, though skeptics argued this could be attributed to lighting changes or camera angles. The most disturbing incident during this filming occurred when a sound technician attempted to record ambient audio in the room where Leah was kept. His equipment picked up what sounded like whispered voices speaking in what linguists later identified as possibly being an indigenous Australian dialect. These voices seemed to be having a conversation, though the words were too faint to fully understand. When the technician tried to enhance the recording, his equipment malfunctioned, and the original recordings were mysteriously corrupted. Perhaps even more unsettling was what happened to several of the television crew members after they returned to England. The director of the documentary reported a series of nightmares featuring the doll, dreams so vivid and disturbing that he sought professional help. The cameraman who claimed to have seen Leah's eyes move developed a severe phobia of dolls that required years of therapy to overcome. The sound technician reported that his equipment continued to malfunction for months after the filming, picking up the same whispered voices and completely unrelated recording sessions. These incidents established a pattern that would repeat itself. Over the following decades, people who came into close contact with Letta, especially those who handled it or attempted to study it intensively, often reported ongoing paranormal experiences long after their initial encounter. This led Kerry to become increasingly selective about who he allowed to interact with the doll. In 1983, Kerry was approached by Dr. Robert Harrison, professor of anthropology who specialized in indigenous Australian artifacts and folklore. Dr. Harrison was intrigued by reports of Letta's apparent age and cultural significance. He convinced Kerry to allow him to conduct a thorough examination of the doll, including carbon dating of the wood and analysis of the hair and clothing. The results of Dr. Harrison's investigation were startling. Carbon dating revealed that the wood used to create the doll was indeed approximately 200 years old, consistent with the timeline suggested by Kerry's family history. However, more intriguing was the analysis of the doll's hair, which was determined to be genuine human hair from a child, possibly between the ages of 5 and 8 years old. The clothing, while showing signs of age, contained fibers and dyes that were consistent with late 19th century manufacturing techniques. But perhaps most significantly, Dr. Harrison's cultural analysis suggested that the doll's construction incorporated elements that were consistent with indigenous Australian spiritual practices, particularly those related to the creation of sacred objects intended to house spirits or ancestral souls. Dr. Harrison's research uncovered local Aboriginal legends that spoke of powerful shamans who could trap malevolent spirits in specially crafted wooden figures. According to these legends, such objects were created as a form of spiritual protection, containing dangerous entities that might otherwise harm the living. However, the legends also warned that these spirit vessels required careful maintenance and specific rituals to keep the contained entities from escaping or becoming more powerful. This cultural context provided a possible explanation for Letta's apparent supernatural properties. If the doll was indeed created according to these traditional practices, it might genuinely contain a trapped spirit that had grown more powerful and malevolent over the decades of neglect and abandonment. Dr. Harrison's investigation also revealed that the area where Kerry discovered Letta had a dark history. The land had been the site of several tragic events in the late 1800s, including the deaths of multiple children from disease and accidents. Local Aboriginal elders confirmed that the area was considered spiritually significant and potentially dangerous, with warnings passed down through generations to avoid disturbing objects found there. As Letta's reputation grew, so did the number of people seeking to experience its paranormal properties firsthand. Kerry found himself hosting a steady stream of visitors, ranging from serious paranormal researchers to thrill seekers looking for a supernatural experience. However, he quickly established strict rules for these encounters after several particularly disturbing incidents. In 1987, a group of university students convinced Kerry to let them spend a night in his home with Letta as part of a psychology experiment on the power of suggestion and group hysteria. The students, all skeptics, were confident they could debunk the doll's supposed supernatural properties through rational observation and scientific methodology. The night began with the students treating the entire situation as a joke, making light of the doll's appearance and mocking the stories they had heard. However, their attitude changed dramatically as the hours passed. By midnight, all 5 students reported feeling increasingly uncomfortable and anxious. They described a growing sense that they were being watched and judged by an unseen presence. At approximately 2 a.m., the students claimed that Letta began to emit a low humming sound, almost like a mechanical vibration, but organic in nature. When they attempted to record the sound, their equipment either malfunctioned or captured only silence. The humming was apparently audible only to those present in the room with the doll. The most terrifying incident occurred around 4 a.m. when one of the students, Sarah, claimed she saw Letta's mouth move as if it were trying to speak. She became convinced that the doll was attempting to communicate with her specifically, and she began to respond to what she perceived as questions or commands. Her fellow students watched in horror as Sarah carried on a one-sided conversation with the doll, her responses becoming increasingly distressed and frightened. When her friends tried to intervene, Sarah became agitated and protective of the doll, claiming that it was scared and needed her help. It took considerable effort to separate her from Letta, and even then, she continued to insist that she could hear the doll calling for her. The group left Kara's house immediately, and Sarah required several days to fully recover from what appeared to be a form of psychological possession or influence. This incident led Kerry to implement much stricter guidelines for visitors, including limiting exposure time and requiring multiple witnesses for any interactions with Letta. He also began to document these encounters more carefully, building an extensive record of the doll's effects on different individuals. Over the years, Kerry noticed that Letta seemed to affect different people in different ways. Children and sensitive individuals often had the most extreme reactions, while skeptics and those with strong personalities sometimes experienced more subtle, but longer-lasting effects. Women appeared to be more susceptible to the doll's influence than men, and people with any history of psychological trauma or emotional instability often had particularly intense experiences. In 1992, Kerry was contacted by the producers of a popular Australian television show dedicated to paranormal phenomena. They wanted to feature Letta in a live broadcast, allowing viewers to witness the doll's supposed supernatural abilities in real time. Despite his reservations, Kerry agreed to participate, believing that the controlled environment of a television studio might provide better documentation of any paranormal activity. The live broadcast was scheduled for Halloween night. Adding to the theatrical atmosphere of the event, the show's format included interviews with Kerry, demonstrations of Letta's alleged abilities, and live audience reactions. What the producers and audience witnessed that night would become one of the most talked-about paranormal broadcasts in Australian television history. The program began normally, with Kerry explaining Letta's history and the various phenomena he had witnessed over the years. The doll was placed on a table in the center of the studio, surrounded by cameras and monitoring equipment. For the first portion of the show, nothing unusual occurred, leading some viewers and crew members to believe that the doll's reputation was greatly exaggerated. However, as the program progressed, subtle changes began to occur. The studio's lighting system experienced several unexplained fluctuations, causing the illumination around Letta to dim and brighten in seemingly random patterns. The show's audio engineers reported hearing faint whispers in their headsets, similar to the voices captured during previous investigations. The most dramatic moment came during a planned segment, where Kerry was demonstrating how people typically reacted to holding the doll. As he lifted Letta from its display stand, the studio's main camera malfunctioned, creating a distorted image that made the doll appear to be surrounded by a dark, shadowy aura. When backup cameras were switched on, they captured what appeared to be movement in Letta's facial features, with several viewers later claiming they saw the doll blink or smile during the broadcast. But the most unsettling part of the live broadcast occurred when the show opened its phone lines for viewer reactions. Within minutes, the switchboard was overwhelmed with calls from people claiming they could feel the doll's presence through their television screens. Dozens of viewers reported sudden feelings of nausea, headaches, or overwhelming dread while watching the program. Several parents called to report that their children had begun crying or hiding when Letta appeared on screen. Even though they had been watching the show happily just moments before, most disturbing were the calls from viewers, who claimed they could see additional figures or shadows moving around the doll that weren't visible to the studio cameras. Multiple callers described seeing what looked like the ghostly figure of a child standing near or behind Letta. Gesturing as if trying to communicate something urgent or distressing, the broadcast had to be cut short when several studio audience members became violently ill, and 2 crew members collapsed and required medical attention. The show's host later described the experience as the most genuinely frightening event of his career, stating that he felt a malevolent presence in the studio that seemed to grow stronger as the program continued. Following the television broadcast, Kerry received hundreds of letters and calls from viewers sharing their own experiences during and after watching the program. Many reported ongoing nightmares featuring the doll, while others claimed to have experienced unexplained phenomena in their homes following the broadcast. Some viewers became so distressed that they sought professional help to cope with the psychological effects of their exposure to Letta. Even through television, this widespread reaction convinced Kerry that Letta's influence extended far beyond physical proximity and could somehow be transmitted through electronic media. He became much more cautious about allowing the doll to be photographed or filmed, concerned about the potential impact on unsuspecting viewers. In recent decades, Kerry has continued to live with Letta, developing what he describes as a complex relationship with the doll and whatever entity might inhabit it. He has learned to recognize signs of increased paranormal activity and has developed strategies for managing the doll's more disruptive behaviors. However, he emphasizes that living with Letta requires constant vigilance and respect for the powerful forces at play. Kerry reports that the doll's activity seems to follow certain patterns, with periods of relative calm interrupted by episodes of intense paranormal phenomena. These active periods often coincide with significant events in Kerry's life, anniversaries of important dates, or visits from new people. He's learned to prepare for these episodes by securing objects that might be moved or thrown, and by warning visitors about what they might experience. One of the most intriguing aspects of Kerry's long relationship with Letta is his claim that he has occasionally received what he believes to be communications from the entity inhabiting the doll. These communications typically come through dreams or sudden, intrusive thoughts that feel foreign to his own mental patterns. The messages often seem to relate to the doll's history, the circumstances of its creation, or warnings about potential dangers. According to Kerry, these communications have revealed that the spirit within Letta is that of an Aboriginal child who died tragically in the area where the doll was found. The child's spirit was trapped in the wooden figure through a ritual performed by a tribal elder who was trying to protect the community from the child's traumatized and angry ghost. However, decades of neglect and the cultural disconnection from the WASP's original spiritual practices have allowed the trapped spirit to become increasingly powerful and malevolent. This narrative, whether real or imagined, has provided Kerry with a framework for understanding Letta's behavior and has influenced how he interacts with the doll. He has attempted to show respect for the supposed spirit, treating Letta with the reverence he believes would be appropriate for a sacred Aboriginal artifact. This approach seems to have resulted in fewer aggressive incidents, though the paranormal activity has never completely ceased. Today, Kerry continues to be the sole caretaker of what may be the world's most haunted doll. He has received numerous offers from collectors, museums, and paranormal researchers who want to acquire Letta, but he has refused all of them. He believes that his role as the doll's guardian is a responsibility he cannot abandon, both for his own safety and for the protection of others who might not understand the proper way to handle such a powerful supernatural artifact. Kerry's story raises fascinating questions about the nature of haunted objects and the relationship between belief, cultural context, and paranormal phenomena. Whether Letta is genuinely possessed by a supernatural entity or represents an elaborate case of psychological suggestion and cultural projection, its impact on those who encounter it has been undeniable and well documented. The case of Letta, The doll challenges our understanding of reality and forces us to consider possibilities that exist beyond our conventional scientific. It reminds us that there are still mysteries in the world that cannot be easily explained or dismissed, and that the line between the natural and supernatural may be far more blurred than we typically acknowledge. As we conclude this deep dive into one of the most compelling paranormal cases of modern times, I want to hear from you. What do you think about Letta's story? Do you believe that objects can truly be haunted? Or do you think there are psychological and social explanations for these phenomena? Have you ever encountered an object that made you feel uncomfortable? Or frightened for reasons you couldn't explain? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more investigations into the world's most mysterious and unexplained phenomena. Remember to hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode, because the world is full of strange stories waiting to be told. And we're just getting started on our journey into the unknown. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring. And remember that reality might be far stranger than any of us imagine. Thanks for joining me on this chilling exploration of Letta the doll. I'll see you in the next episode, where we'll be diving into another mystery that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the world around us.